weeks that we were going to talk about Delilah, and tonight is going to be the night. I thought we were going to get to Delilah, and then there was another episode, and then I thought we were going to get to Delilah, and then there was another episode. And so we're in Judges chapter number 16 and verse number 4. Judges chapter 16 and verse number 4. And we're going to finish the chapter, and so I'm going to go quickly. You guys pretty much know the story. There's going to be some highlights. I'm going to bring some things up, some warnings for us. Of course, we've been hearing warnings about, or for us, throughout the life of Samson, and so he's been a good, bad example for us. Okay, he's been a good, bad example, and he will continue to be a good, bad example for us through the rest of his life. All right, Judges chapter 16 and verse number 4, and it came to pass afterward that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. Do you think that Delilah was a good little godly Jewish girl? All we know about her is she's in the valley of Sorek. We're not sure that she's a Philistine. It never does mention. However, she does basically hang out with Philistines. So the assumption is that she's a Philistine. Samson's record would tell us that she's a Philistine, but we're not told 100% that she is. Just that she affiliates herself with the Philistines because the lords of the Philistines come to her, and we're going to see that in just a moment. So they know her, and they know of her. And do you think that Samson really loved this woman? Or do you think it was more of lust? I mean, come on. He just got done with in verses 1 through 3, with the harlot that we looked at. Right, where he carried those gates away. Do you remember carrying the gates? Yep. How many miles did he carry those gates? 37 miles. From an elevation of 127 feet to 3,041 feet. So it was uphill all the way. Remember how your parents used to say, when I went to school, I walked uphill both ways. It was uphill both ways in the snow. I haven't found that place that it was uphill going this way and then it was uphill going this way. I haven't found that place. So he had just got done with that woman in verses 1 through 3, and now he's in love with Delilah. That's a little suspect. Then verse number 5, it says, and the lords of the Philistines came up unto her, and said unto her, entice him, and see wherein his great strength lieth, by what means we may prevail against him, that we may bind him to afflict him, and we will give thee every one of us 1,100 pieces of silver. So there's a bunch of lords of the Philistines here, and they want to give her, each one of them is going to give her 1,100 pieces of silver. Girls, don't you think that you could entice a man for whatever period of time to get 1,100 pieces of silver times however many lords of the Philistines there were? And if I remember another story, I think there's either 12 or 13 lords. So that's a lot of silver, right? That's a lot of silver. Not lords of leaping. These aren't leaping lords. These are paying out lords. All right, and the reason is so that they can afflict him. Do you think they really wanted to afflict him, or do you think they just wanted to kill him? Yeah, they want to kill him. Verse number 6, Delilah said to Samson, tell me, I pray thee, wherein thy great strength lieth, and wherewith thou mightest be bound to afflict thee. So, the first time, this might be an innocent question. Right? The first time. This might be an innocent question. Hey, tell me how you got your great strength. getting in a conversation, getting to know the man that she's supposedly in love with. Tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get so strong? I heard you carried those gates 37 miles uphill both ways in the snow. And not just the gate, but you pulled the posts up out of the ground and the beam was still in it. Remember, we were talking about that. So the first time, this might be an innocent question. Verse 7, Samson said unto her, if they bind me with 7 green withs that were never dried, then shall I be weak and be as another man. By the way, man, how do you feel about that? Here's Samson, a man, calling all us, the rest of us men weak. I feel like that was a slight on our character, on our manliness. Hey, but the withs here, now, that's what they used to make the bowstrings. And the green ones, what they would do is they would take the green withs and they would tie it onto the bow, and then the width would dry and it would stretch. And it would stretch that string so it would be tight, and then you could with the bow. So that's what a green width is. Yes. So what would happen is as the widths dried on him, because he was bound with them, it would cause him to be weak. As other men. Man. As other men, man. Verse number 8, then the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 green withs, which had never been dried, and she bound them with them. Now there were men lying in wait, abiding with her in the chamber. And she said unto them, unto him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he brake the withs as a thread of tow is broken, when it touches the fire, so his strength was not known. So the first time that Delilah asked the question, what was Samson's response?
A lie.
It was a lie.
He didn't want her to know his weakness.
It was a lie. Now, couldn't he have just said, how do you think God feels about liars?
Yeah. He doesn't like
Like one of the Big Ten, I mean, the Big Ten. In Exodus chapter 20, we're given the Big Ten. And one of it is, thou shalt not bear false witness. And here's Samson supposed to be set apart, a Nazirite, unto the Lord. And what's his first response to this woman? It's a lie. Couldn't Samson have just said, you know what? That's none of your business. It's the none ya button, Talia. None ya. Yeah, none your business. All right, so she binds them with the 7 green withs. He breaks out of them. Verse number 10, Delilah said to Samson, behold, thou hast mocked me and told me lies. Now tell me, I pray thee, wherewith thou mightest be bound. And he said unto her, if they bind me fast with new ropes that never were occupied, then shall I be weak and be as another man. All right, so new ropes. So we've gone from green withs, green little strings, now to ropes. All right, new ropes. Again, another lie. Verse 12, Delilah therefore took new ropes and bound him therewith and said unto him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And there were liars in wait, abiding in the chamber, and he brake them from his arm like a thread.
They're in here again.
Verse number 13, Delilah said unto Samson, hitherto thou hast mocked me and told me lies. Tell me wherewith thou mightest be bound. And he said unto her, look at this next one. He's moving up the chain. He's getting closer to the truth. He said unto her, if thou weavest the 7 locks of my head with a web, and she fastened it with a pin, and said unto him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he awaked out of his sleep and went away with the pin of the beam and with the web. Now, what do you think this looked like?
It's kind of funny, wouldn't it?
What do you think this web looked like and this pin? I'm going with man bun times 7. I'm going man bun times 7. I've always thought of he had a rack on his head, and the hairs, the 7 locks of his head were doing this, and there was a pin going through to hold it into place. That's what I've always thought of. But what do you weave with? A loom. So this is probably a smaller version of a loom that you would run the little shuttle down through, pull down the material, run the shuttle back through this way, pull down, and then you're making a rug. All right? If you've ever seen a rug maker, how they hand make rugs, that's how they do it. They've got this machine. They got a shuttle that runs the thread through the weaves, and those things shoot through. And then they've got the comb that does this. It goes down between the weaves, and it kind of tightens up all of the material. And so that's what this ends up being, is something similar to that. So this is a weaver's beam, but a smaller one. It had to be portable so that they could get it into her bedroom. And then they were able to somehow, manipulate his head so they get him like this and get him so his hair is going down through this weaver's beam. She said, awake, Samson, the Philistines be upon thee. How many times is that?
This is the 3rd time.
This is the 3rd time. 3rd time's the charm. I'm thinking 3 times I've said this is how I can become weak. 3 times she's done it to try to make me weak.
So that would tell me that he's really foolish if he tells her anything else.
So I'm like done with this woman. From here on out, the chapter's done. If Pastor John was there, or Pastor Brimstone was there, the chapter ends. You don't love me. What's going on? Why is it that I'm giving you an answer and all of a sudden I find myself with that answer, wrapped up with that answer? And then you say, well, how come you're mocking me? Why is it? Matter of fact, look at verse number 15. And she said unto him, how canst thou say, I love thee, when thine heart is not with me? Thou hast mocked me these 3 times and hast not told me wherein thy great strength lieth. Hey, dummy. He must have been a blonde Jew.
Figured out her possibility.
He must have been a blonde Jew. I used to be blonde, so I can say blonde jokes. Now I'm just gray-headed. How canst thou say, I love thee? What's she doing? What's her motivation in this? Is it love?
No. Money.
No, it's the love of money is what it is. That's right. She's about to get 1,100 pieces of silver from each of the lords of the Philistines. And she's saying, she has the nerve to say in verse number 15, how canst thou say thou love me? Men, we are catfish. Wave a little bit of stinky cheese in front of us, and we're suckers. Catfish. There was a commercial on, and I can't even remember what the commercial's about. But you remember the singing fish? You know, where they're hanging on a plaque like this, and then the half of the fish goes out like this, and they start singing a song. Usually it's like some country song. They sing. But in the commercial, the last line of it says, and catfish are so dumb. Ever since then, I've called men catfish because catfish are so dumb. Delilah's waving a little bit of stinky cheese in front of the catfish. And what does he do? Thou hast mocked me these 3 times, and hast not told me wherein thy great strength lieth. And it came to pass, when she pressed him daily with her words. Can I give you the Hebrew word for that? Nagging.
Yeah.
Amanda, how did you know that word? Wait, your dad's a pastor. I'm sure it was him that's... Nag. I want to liken it to plowing the heifer. You wouldn't have known it if you hadn't plowed with my heifer. She pressed him daily with her words, you don't love me, you don't love me, and urged him so that his soul was vexed unto death. Guys, have you ever been nagged to death? Don't shake your head yes. She's sitting right there looking at you. Throat chop. See, catfish are so dumb. All the guys are sitting here. Yes, I've been nagged to death. No, you haven't, because you're still sitting here. Verse number 17. His soul was so vexed unto death that he told her all his heart, and said unto her, there hath not come a razor upon mine head, for I have been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak and be like. And I believe, here's my belief. The Spirit of God left Samson right then. And when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up this once, for he hath showed me all his heart. Then the lords of the Philistines came up unto her, and brought money in their hand. I'm sure the first thing she said was, show me the money. Yeah. And she made him sleep upon her knees, and she called for a man, and she caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head, and she began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. I wonder if the man that she called was not later the guy that cut all the hair off of every single GI that's gone through basic training. I remember when I was going into basic training, they pulled us into a room. There were 3 chairs. There were 3 guys at the same time. And these barbers had the whitest blades I've ever seen. And if you went in there with an afro, they shaved you down the middle, and then they went down to the next guy. If you came in there with really long, flowing locks, they shaved you down the middle and went on to the next guy. If you came in there already with a buzz cut, they shaved you. And I'm sure it was this same guy that shaved Samson is the same guy that shaved the GIs. But notice that it wasn't just a trim. It just wasn't a cutting of the locks off with scissors. What did this man do to him? It says shave. So he didn't leave any stubble whatsoever on Samson's head. It was a clean shave. Now, how asleep do you have to be to have somebody clean shave your head and you don't know it?
Really out, like knocked out.
She made him sleep upon her knees. Warm milk, something like what Jael did with Sisera. She gave him some milk, had him lay down, put some covers on him, then she drove a tent stake through his temple. She made him sleep upon her knees, and then she called for a man. That reminded me immediately, and I think we talked about these verses last week or maybe a couple weeks ago, but in James chapter 1, verses 13 through 15, we have this progression. It says, let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God cannot tempt with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away from his own lust and enticed. And when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin. And sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. Do you see Samson in that? With Delilah. So he's with, by the way, any Philistine woman. He doesn't have a good track record. He doesn't have a good track record. There were 3 of them, and all 3 of them were bad for him. But here's the one, here's Delilah. Every man, when he's tempted, he's drawn away from his own lust. He loved the woman from Sorek, whose name was Delilah. Right after he carried the gates away from the other woman, there was a mistake. So he was enticed. And then lust hath conceived. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin. What did Samson do with Delilah on those first 3 times that she asked him that question? He lied to her. Isn't that a sin? I mean, it's one of the big 10. Don't you think that God has something to say about that? And then sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. What do you think is going to happen to Samson? Well, you guys know the rest of the story. Let's take a look at it. She said, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. He awoke out of sleep and said, I will go out as at other times before and shake myself. And he wist not that the Lord was departed from him. That's sad. That's the sad part of this whole story, is he did not even know that the Lord had departed from him.
Yeah.
How carnal do you have to be to not know that the Lord is there? And we as Christians can get to that place that we don't even know God's around. We don't even know that he's departed. Verse 21, the Philistines took him and put out his eyes and brought him down to Gaza and bound him with fetters of brass, and he did grind in the prison house. Boy, they put him on a wheel. They chained him up with brass handcuffs, and then they put him on a wheel, and he walked around in a circle for the rest of his life. He was at a millstone, and they would throw whatever on the millstone, and he would walk around. That's what the grind is. He'd just walk around. Verse 22, you better watch out, though. Howbeit the hairs of his head grew back. Howbeit the hair of his head began to grow again after he was shaven. You know, if I knew that the strength of the man that slew several thousand of my fellow countrymen was in his hair, you know what I'd be doing every single day?
Shaving it.
I'd be shaving his head every single day. But they got lax. Verse 23, then the lords of the Philistines gathered them together for to offer a great sacrifice unto Dagon their God, and to rejoice, for they said, our God hath delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hand. Whose God delivered him?
Our God.
Yeah.
Not their God.
So we see later on, or is it later on or is it before? Later on, that Dagon bows down before Jehovah God. They bring the ark, put it into the temple of Dagon, and they come in, and Dagon's fallen down before the ark. And then they set him up, and then they come back the next day, Dagon's fallen down before the ark. They set him up a third time, and then he falls down again. It breaks off his hands, and does his head come off at the same time? But I know his hands come off before Jehovah God. But look what they're saying here. They're denying God, and they're saying that their idol delivered Samson. No, Samson delivered Samson. because he was dumb. Our God hath delivered into our hands our enemy, the destroyer of our country, which slew many of us. And it came to pass, when their hearts were merry, they said, call for Samson. You remember reading later on in the scriptures, I believe it's in the Psalms, wine is a mocker. So they were making merry. What do you think they were making merry with? I'm sure there was some kind of strong drink there. They said, call for Samson, the one that killed a whole bunch of us, so that we can bring him out and make sport of him. Call for Samson that we make us sport. Now, they probably threw rotten vegetables at him. They probably had him act goofy. There's so many different things that were spoken about making sport. Whatever it was humiliating to Samson. And they called for Samson out of the prison house, and he had made them sport, and they set him between the pillars. And Samson said unto the lad, by the way, this is a prison guard, that held him by the hand, suffer me that I may feel the pillars whereupon the house standeth, that I may lean upon them. And the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there. And there were upon the roof about 3,000 men and women that beheld while Samson made sport. Those guys that paid 1,100 pieces of silver each were there. Now this lad, this prison guard, when Samson said, hey, let me feel the pillars that hold up the house, what do you think's going through the lad's mind? You're so funny. You were just making sport over there. You're just keeping on doing it. And he carries him over there. Because Samson's weak as any other man. And can any other man pull down the house by the pillars? Finally, Samson has a spark of goodness, of being right. Verse 28, Samson called unto the Lord and said, O Lord God, remember me, I pray thee, strengthen me, I pray thee, only this once. O God, that I may be at once avenged of the Philistines. Now hold on right there for a second. Do you think that if Samson would have prayed, Lord, help me to kill all these Philistines and allow me to escape so that I can kill more? Do you think the Lord would have answered that prayer? I believe he would have. Because his prayer is only this once. Did you guys read that?
Oh, yeah.
Samson wanted to die. So he says only this once. I believe that if Samson's prayer would have been, Lord, help me to kill all these people, get out, and then kill some more. What was the purpose of Samson? To judge the Philistines. That was his whole purpose from birth. Was for that reason. Do you think the Lord would have answered that prayer? I believe he would have. And the Lord did answer his prayer because he said only this once. Out of the mouth of Samson. And then we were reading on and I stopped. Why was it that Samson wanted to be avenged? Was it because they had killed his first wife? Was it because they had killed his first wife's father-in-law or his father-in-law? Or because they figured out his riddle and he had to pay? No, it tells us right here the only reason, it wasn't because you made fun of God, and it wasn't because the Spirit of God left me. That wasn't the reason for the revenge. It says that I may be at once avenged of the Philistines for my 2 eyes. So he started off his prayer good, well, Lord God. And he went downhill from there. Lord, let's judge these Philistines because because of the enticement of them, the Spirit of God left me. I lost my Nazirite privilege. Nope. Certainly wasn't for the loss of the Spirit of God. Samson took hold of the two middle pillars, upon which the house stood, and on which it was borne up, and of one with his right hand, and of the other with his left. And Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." And he bowed himself with all his might, and the house fell upon the lords and all the people that were therein. So the dead which he slew at his death were more than they which he slew in his life. Then his brethren and all the house of his father came down and took him and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the burying place of Manoah, his father. And he judged Israel 20 years. We got that again. He judged Israel 20 years. The second time. But look at what happened. He bows himself, pulls the house down, and then in verse 31, the brethren, so the Jews, and all of his house of his father came down and took him and brought him up. Why do you think the Philistines let them come down and get the body of Samson?
Are they afraid he'd come back again?
Where are all the Philistines?
Dead.
Where are all the lords of the Philistines?
Dead.
All the ones that would stop anybody from coming in and taking somebody's body.
Dead.
They're dead. So in the turmoil, his family came and took his body. There's not any ruling class. They were all on the rooftop. All the lords of the Philistines were there. I bet the sheriff of Nottingham was there too. He pulled down the house. And then they were able to come. And at the very end, he was able to have an honorable burial in lieu, or I'm sorry, what am I trying to say? In spite of the immoral life that he lived, he was still able to have an honorable burial, buried with his father, in the same place of his father. And so we have the end of Samson here. And like I mentioned at the beginning, he's a good, bad example for us. Men, don't be catfish. Women, don't be stinky cheese. If you know anything about catfish fishing, stinky cheese is the bait you use to catch catfish. And it stinks. When my dad would take us to the river and we would go catfish fishing, we would we'd peel the lid off of that cheese, and oh man, did it stink. And you'd have to put your hand in there and make a little ball and then wrap it around your treble hook, because you had the little 3-prong hook that you wrapped it around, and then you threw that out there. And catfish are so dumb that they came right to the stinky cheese. And they bit right around those 3 hooks, and we reeled them in, and we had us a catfish fry. Do you remember the end of James chapter number 1? Those verses that we read? Verse 15. And sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. So again, guys, don't be catfish. Girls, don't be stinky cheese. All right? Just the encouragement. Again, Samson is a good example of what not to follow. Yeah, we talk about his great strength, but really the story behind the story of Samson is that great immorality that he had that brought him to his death with no eyes, little stubble on his head that started growing back, and the Lord blessed his prayer at the very end. Used in spite of. How much more could Samson have done had he had done it God's way? And the same thing goes for us. How much more could we do if we would do things God's way? All right, questions or comments about any?